At the 9 o'clock Mass, we do a separate liturgy of the Word for the children. And so I asked the parent who was going to be working with the kids, what would they be talking about? And he quickly whispered to me that he was going to focus on Thomas and trying to be able to teach the kids that sometimes you have to believe in things without seeing them. So I got this brilliant idea, and I said to them, "Boys and girls, can you see the ball that I'm holding?" And of course I didn't have a ball, and they looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, "Can you pretend that you see it?" And they jumped on that immediately. They were able to imagine that I was holding a ball. I think kids are much better at that than we are. And maybe that's why the church, especially during Holy Week and Easter, uses so many signs and symbols. It's almost like we're bombarded by them because it helps us to understand and to be able to recognize a deeper kind of reality. And so if you were at Holy Week, you would have noticed the stripping of the altar, or on Good Friday, the veneration of the cross, the blessing of the Easter fire, and the lighting of the Paschal candle, the blessing of water, 4 baptisms at the Easter Vigil, and then all of them anointed with chrism. And we were just sprinkled with water. All of the signs and symbols that the church uses, hopefully, to try and get us to understand things better and to go deeper with our faith. Have you ever wondered if there's a difference between a sign and a symbol? All right, you're looking at me like the kids looked at 9 o'clock. There is a difference. In fact, a sign points to a reality. A symbol is like a sign in that it points to probably more than one reality, but it's different in the sense that unlike a sign, a symbol makes that reality happen. Let me give you an example. I grew up in South Philadelphia, and there's this thing called a stop sign there. So the stop sign points to the reality that a car should stop when it sees it. But if you're crossing the street, there's no guarantee that that car is going to stop, is there? A symbol, though, like water, like fire. Let's take water, for example. It points to a lot of different realities. First of all, if you were thirsty, it points to the fact that water can quench your thirst. If you need to be cleaned, water can do that. It points to that reality of cleansing. And then, of course, when we watch the ocean, there's a sense that water can be dangerous as well. So unlike a sign, a symbol points and then makes it happen. So if you're thirsty and you drink a glass of water, can you see how it quenches your thirst? Or if you need to be washed and you go through water, can you help but come out clean? Words can sometimes be like symbols. As a matter of fact, the gospel today uses a phrase that one commentator called a performative utterance. It's just a fancy way of describing what I described in terms of a symbol. But in fact, when Jesus says, "Peace be with you," the disciples' hearts and minds and souls were changed. There was something about the way Jesus invited the disciples to be peaceful, a performative utterance where it pointed to a reality and made that reality happen. Can you stop and think with me for a minute what life was like for the disciples? After 3 years of being with Jesus, life has changed dramatically. He's no longer with them. And they're trying to figure out how to turn their lives right side up and back to normal again. And it's in the midst of probably a lot of confusion and maybe even self-recrimination that the disciples are feeling very anxious. And it's into that midst that Jesus appears. Maybe some of us would want to scold them. Like, get your act together, will you? But Jesus doesn't do that. He responds with understanding and says to them, "Peace be with you." And it actually happened where they were at peace and things started to change. Can you begin to see that Jesus is not at all saying the equivalent of "have a nice day" or "congratulations"? That he is doing something much more profound. That through his presence, he gifts his disciples. It's a God gift. It's the gift of peace. It is a gratuitous gift that is given. And whenever we hear the word gratuitous, automatically we think of grace. It's offered to us as well. But I think we sometimes are more like the disciples than we think we are. And in fact, there are some times where our lives are turned upside down and inside out. And we may hear the phrase, "Peace be with you," but not totally understand it or allow God's grace to work within us. You know, Jesus is talking about the kind of peace that the world cannot give. We've heard that before in Scripture. It's God's gift of peace. And consequently, that gift of peace resides so deeply within us that no matter what is going on, we are still peaceful. Don't you wish you had that? I do. That kind of peaceful feeling, even when things around me are not feeling as peaceful. There's even this analogy that this peace that I'm talking about is like being at the bottom of an ocean, so deep within us that it's surrounded by the ocean water. And like any ocean, we know that usually the depth of the ocean isn't necessarily affected by what's going on the surface. And so, with a typhoon or a hurricane that's hitting on the surface of the water, the peace that resides deep in the bottom of the ocean is untouched and calm. I'd like to invite all of us to think about how God uses phrases like "peace be with you" to offer us God's grace. Maybe if we allow God's grace to work in us, our lives can change. What will it take tonight for you to be more peaceful? It's not going to just happen. We have to cooperate with God's grace. What will it take for it to continue tomorrow? This Easter season is really an invitation to recognize God's gift of new life. Yes, I'm talking about the resurrection, but more basically, I'm talking about how God invites us to a new way of being now, a new way of living. May the grace of God be at work in us, and may that performative utterance have an effect so that we might truly be peaceful this week, even with the storms that surround us.